Hi, bitch, or hi, bitches, if I decide to send this to anyone else or post it online. I want to post it online just because I need to. I need to start somewhere. But yeah, if you get this video or if it's posted online, it was originally intended to go to one of my friends because she said I can send her my videos to get comfortable talking on camera because I'm not comfortable talking on camera. Um, but anyways, like, okay, so I look at celebrities. I look at individual charts most days and try to see what's going on. I'm not like super into true crime or anything, but I think we all kind of have interest in people that commit certain atrocities, just to see like what I don't want to say they're kind of like what's the word exalted, but there's something different about them, and not just in the sense that they commit crimes. There's just like who was I? I don't want to say it's Marilyn Manson, but he could have been the one that like coined the term or coined the connection between um exalting criminals to the status of celebrity. I think that's where the name comes from. And that's just kind of the world we live in. Anyways, I was thinking about the Columbine shootings that happened in 1999, and I was like, okay, I wonder if those boys had accurate birth times. One of them did. I looked at his chart, and because I'm trying to, not practice, but trying to get quick with predictive analysis. And you need to do a natal analysis. I'm rambling already. I have a 7:30 dinner, so which is why I'm all dolled up, which is why I'm sitting here talking to you because normally I'm not dolled up. So I have a toddler. If he bangs on the door, it will break my concentration. But I'm trying to just post something, share something. Um, I'm trying to keep my cool, focus on dinner, and focus on what's in front of me right now. So I'm trying to get comfortable with quick predictive analysis. You need to look at the individual chart to understand what any kind of transits or progressions or solar arc means. So I've looked at Eric Harris's chart. He was the skinny blonde one that, was involved in Columbine. The other kid had a birth time with a C Rodden rating. I don't think that's good enough for me, which is why I didn't look at his charts. So I've looked at Eric's chart and I've looked at his predictive cycles around that time because I wanted to kind of understand where he was and why this happened, why this could have happened, why he did what he did. Um, I still feel like now there's so much contention about everything that happened with Columbine. Um, People still think they were bullied. People still think they wanted to send a message or wanted to be celebrities. So I just wanted to see if anything like that was reflected in Eric's chart. And I think we should probably just I'll go straight into his chart and then we'll look at the spectacles. So I'll show my screen. And I'll try not to focus on anything that isn't super like relevant because I tend to stray. And I'll keep an eye on the time. Also, like I have people coming over as well. So I need to get this done quickly because they'll probably be like knocking on my door wanting to speak to me, but I'll worry about that later. Okay, let me get my pen. So with Eric's chart, the thing that stands out, and with most charts, the thing that stands out the most are going to be angular planets. Um, as you can see, Eric is a Scorpio rising. He has Uranus right there on the ascendant, 29 degrees Scorpio. Those with Uranus on the ascendant tend to be very cataclysmic regarding their relationships with others, how they impact their environment, tend to be very polarizing figures. I would recommend if you wanted to like understand this placement a bit more, just looking up celebrities with Uranus on the ascendant, and I don't think you'll be super surprised by that. But Uranus and Scorpio on the ascendant, Uranus on a Scorpio ascendant, is going to be someone that has a very polarizing effect on their environment and the people that are involved with them. They're going to be rebellious. Uranus is kind of rebellious, but in Scorpio, it's going to be rebellious for rebellion's sake. Scorpio likes to push the apple cart over just to kind of get a reaction out of it. We all know Scorpios in our life that do really questionable things just to get a reaction out of people. They hate stagnation. And yeah, Uranus is a really kind of electric planet. So this is someone that was very quick regarding how he offended people. Um, and I'm going to say offended just because we know what he did, so we know he wasn't really operating the higher vibration of Uranus on the ascendant. Um, so yeah, a very polarizing guy to be around in general. I'm not saying like he was super unlikable or anything like that, but and I hate to even say it like this because it sounds like I'm kind of like being nice to him. I'm not condoning anything that he did. It's just that he was one of those guys where you either love him or you hate him. But I think most people didn't really like him. Um, and I think that has a lot to do with this Aries stellium he has going on, particularly the Sun, conjunct Mars, and Venus. So the Sun is exalted in Aries, Mars is in its domicile. So Mars and the Sun was super strong in Aries. Venus in Aries is in his fall. So I don't think he was particularly socially adept. Um, Came off probably a little bit rough around the edges, but regarding that, there is a certain magnetism because we do have Venus opposite Pluto. He was someone that was going to attract very obsessive relationships, and this is the placement has a lot to do with magnetism, drawing people in socially, keeping them there. A very possessive type of personality regarding all relationships, because we're not just talking about Venus. Regarding intimate relationships, I don't even know if he had any intimate relationships. He was 18 when he, you know, so um, I'm sure he had some kind of relationships, but this is just relating in general, social relating in general. What he valued, he was very obsessive regarding what he valued. But with the Sun and Mars conjunction, it just dominated that Venus. He was someone that was and we're not just talking about Aries, in any sign, maybe less so in Libra, but the Sun conjunct Mars is going to be a very domineering kind of personality. Or not domineering. In Aries, it would be domineering. I would say dominating and loud personality. Um, and so he has a Sun in the fifth house, conjunct Mars. Venus is there too. Venus is in its fall. He was someone that really wanted to feel special as an individual. And that again, that it's so reflected in what he did. He was like he wanted to be, as far as I could tell, I'm not, a historian regarding this subject, but he wanted to be a kind of figurehead, a kind of celebrity. He wanted to shine in a more higher vibration. He was someone that was supposed to, in this lifetime, have authentic relationships with people, um, that felt right for him. I'm sure I'll try and like, I don't want to get lost, but I'll try and like refer back to certain aspects when you know, when I go off on a tangent, I'll try to clarify why I'm saying that. But regarding other things in his chart, he was someone that he was so focused on himself within the context of him fitting into society. It was less about him. Who am I? Why do I behave this way? What do I want? It was, oh, I'm Eric. I exist in this world. This world's out to get me. The Sun opposite Pluto, Mars opposite Pluto, is someone that is going to feel, what's the word? Controlled, yes, but it's more like, yeah, kind of like powerless regarding, in his case, he has Pluto in the 11th house, which is society as a whole. So he has Pluto in the 11th, and then he has Uranus, which is correlated with the 11th house in Scorpio. So there's that kind of connection there of him feeling like he's kind of like beaten down by society, he's rejected by society. Um, this is reiterated over and over again in his chart. He's someone that felt outcasted. And he probably was outcasted. Not he didn't just feel outcasted, he was outcasted. And what he was supposed to do was say, okay, I'm an outcast. I'm going to live my life the way I want to, anyways, regardless of what society has to say about it. And I think he fell into the trap of, well, if society is going to be like a very Scorpio kind of, you know, method of thinking, if society is going to be like this, I'll show them, I'll be like that. And ultimately, what happened, and people were in a lot of pain. And so he's got that Aries thing going on. So he was kind of like this. He was very individualistic. You can see that with, Uranus on the ascendant, regardless of the sign. Mars conjunct the Sun, very loud personality. But what stands out the most, and this is what I'm trying to not I need to move fast. I have somewhere to be. Um, so he's got this T square involving. He's got this T square involving Saturn conjunct Jupiter in Libra in the 10th, opposite Mars in Aries in the 4th, squaring his moon in Cancer in 8th. So we've spoken about that kind of like the rebellious personality of Eric. Then something I've noticed a lot in astrology is that most people have something I refer to as like a sub personality. I'm sure we all have them. There are certain things in the chart that kind of contradict the rest of the chart. He's got this kind of like um, hateful, spiteful, polarizing personality. But then he's kind of just, very emotional and needy. We've got that moon in Cancer in the 8th house. Um, Very insular, hiding his emotions. And then that moon is also squaring Mercury. I think that's the tightest aspect in his chart. I don't have it written down, so I can't check. Um, Moon square Mercury is going to be someone that is very, again, with the signs involved, Aries and Cancer. Like Cancer is a very defensive sign. Aries is a very bold sign. It can be Aries is more offensive. Um, so very defensive of his emotions and his privacy and his inner world. Um, and then that Cancer moon squaring the Libra planets in his 10th house, a very public house. He's kind of like it's as if he's got that rebellious personality. He's emotionally very needy, and he's like pulling himself away from people in his personal life. He is, that Mercury in the 4th house, pulling away from pretty much everyone, pulling away from society. And this was the biggest motivating factor in his life. He wasn't feeling, he never felt, not never, usually didn't feel very emotionally fulfilled. And I think that resulted in a lot of rage in his case. Um, it's interesting because I'm supposed to be focusing, based on my books and my training, on that planetary pattern of the T square. But for some reason, this opposition speaks louder to me. I'm just going to go with it right now. Oppositions are an aspect that always get worked out in relationships. The 4th and 10th house always has to do with the parents. He has Saturn in Libra. These are people that are very concerned with relationships. They have a karma surrounding relationships in this life. And again, he has a sun conjunct the ruler of his first house and the ruler of his 7th house, which is his relationship axis. Venus and Mars are also the planets of relating in anyone's chart. So we see that reiterated twice in his chart. Relationships were a huge factor for him, and not just relating one on one and regarding society as a whole. So, you know, Mercury rules his 10th house. I don't care what anyone says. In my studies, that axis is always the parents. The 10th house, 9 times out of 10, is going to be the mother. The 4th house is going to be the father. He has the ruler of the 10th house in his 4th, the ruler of the 4th house in his 10th. There was something going on with his parents. And I want to say that, this Jupiter in Libra is kind of like I don't have much of a connection to Jupiter in my chart personally. It trines my Mercury, squares my Mars. That's about it. But like I have a really hard time kind of understanding Jupiter sometimes, because everybody kind of talks about it as this like very positive influence. I don't really see it as that. I see it as it always promising 9 times out of 10 more than it can deliver. And I feel like Eric, with that conjunction to Saturn as well, kind of saw himself as like an authority or felt like he was an authority regarding relationships. And he got that through the lineage of his parents. He saw how his dad, and I don't know these people, whatever. I'm getting the impression based on his chart. He saw how his father treated his mother. His father likely said to Eric, "This is how a man should be. This is how a man treats women." Blah blah blah. And then I think that was deeply ingrained into Eric, and because of those beliefs, that's why he never really got his needs met because he felt like and I'm sure, I mean, I don't want to say like nice things about him, but based on the chart, this is someone that would be a very chivalrous kind of partner, um, albeit someone that is kind of like demanding, emotionally needy, um, but someone you could depend on in a relationship, heterosexual relationship with a man providing for a woman. Um, but he was almost like, this is how a man's supposed to be. Um, because of that kind of belief that he had deeply instilled in him, he wouldn't kind of talk about his emotions. He wouldn't, and I know he had like a diary, and he would talk about like, well, these people, they deserve to burn in hell. They're idiots. I am a genius. That kind of like I think that was a performance just with the sun in the fifth house. I think that was him. What is the word? Um, what's it called where like men kind of like beat their chest, like pull their shoulders back and beat their chest? Oh, what's it called? I can't remember. He was kind of like doing that in those journal entries. I don't think that was actually a reflection of how he felt. I think how he felt was more so that he felt not impotent, but kind of like he wasn't able to express that kind of that lunar um energy within himself. And then I don't think he was like really young. I don't think he had that much success regarding relationships just because he was young, not because of like any other reason. I think if he stayed alive for a bit longer, and there's something in the transits that, you know, bolsters what I'm saying. But he didn't get to have those lunar needs met, and he didn't have anyone to project them on either. Um, the eighth house is difficult for people to tap into. He has all that scorpionic energy. So I think it was very private to him, and he never really got to share that with anyone else. Um, and there is that kind of like, Cancer's kind of like very moody and kind of misunderstood. And he felt like no one was ever going to understand him. And I think that kind of like he got caught in this vicious cycle of hating himself at that, Mercury and Aries squaring the moon, hating himself, and then kind of not blaming it on society, but hating himself and saying, "No, Eric, you need to be a man. This is how men are supposed to be." Blah blah blah. Okay, I think I need to move on. So, but like he also has this really nice, trying to Neptune in his first house, leaning into his second. And there's not all good or all bad in anyone's chart. Um, had he gone down a different road in life, you know, he had the potential to be a good partner, which I don't think he was concerned with being a good partner, but he was concerned with having relationships, which being a good partner would help in that. Um, yeah. Okay, I need to move on. Hold on. I think we should move on to the transits now. It's getting kind of late. So, and I don't really know where to start. I kind of want to start with the progressions because he didn't really have that many progressions going on at the time. Um, but I'm really into the progressed lunation cycle. Um, again, so if you're kind of like a beginner into astrology and you're not super, oh, I forgot to talk. He has no earth in his chart. When someone is lacking a function, they need to get it from somewhere else, or it's kind of like it doesn't come naturally to them. I have one planet in Earth, so which is Saturn in my first house. I'm very kind of hard on myself. I'm insecure about my physical appearance and all of that. But so when you have a singular planet, which is the one planet in a particular element, soaks up a lot of psychic energy. Um, it's exhausting to kind of deal with, especially the fact that it's Saturn. Eric doesn't have any planets in an Earth sign. He only has Chiron, which I don't like to focus on too much. But when someone doesn't have any Earth in their chart, they're not grounded in reality, and they especially, and I've noticed this a lot. I noticed this with myself. They have a lot of difficulty connecting with their physical body, because Earth has to do with like the here and now, and Taurus specifically has to do with sensation and the sensation of the physical body. And Eric has Chiron in his sixth house in Taurus. So Earth on Earth. It's he he had a lot of insecurities regarding his appearance and his body specifically. I don't know if he had any health issues. It wouldn't surprise me if he did, but there was something wrong. He felt there was something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my body. And again, that could have to do with the fact that he felt like he didn't have any success with the relationships, or like he felt like no girls were going to like him. He felt like he was doomed to spend his life alone as an outcast. Um, that Chiron and Taurus in the sixth house is just kind of like a cherry on top for that. But no Earth, he kind of like he didn't feel grounded in reality, which again, someone that is probably wouldn't have done what he did. Um, but let's move on. So I'm I'm really into the progressed lunation cycle, and if you're a little bit advanced in astrology, you can probably continue on. If you're not as advanced, you probably won't understand what I'm saying. But if you're interested in learning, I'll try to explain it the best I can. So a progressed chart. is when you progress the planets by one day equals 1 year in your life regarding an ephemeris. And yeah, this is where we think people are going to get a bit lost. Um, but so we have a lunar return. I think it's 27, 27, 28 years old. It occurs the same time as the Saturn return. A progressed lunation return happens at around, no, maybe it's 25 because I just had mine. 25, 20, no, 26. Um, and so by that point, your progressed moon has gone through all of the signs. And there are certain years for about 2 years in our life where if we're lacking in a certain element, we'll have a moon in a sign that either resonates with our chart or really doesn't resonate with our chart. And when it doesn't resonate, those are the times in our lives where we just kind of we don't understand what's happening, and we have a really hard time kind of understanding where we are in life. We probably do feel a bit lost, I'm going to be honest. Um, and so during the time of what happened on April 20th, 1999, Eric had his progressed moon in Aquarius. Where's Aquarius? In Aquarius at 16 degrees Aquarius. And so he has air in his chart since this wasn't super difficult for him. We need to remember his moon is in Cancer in the eighth house. That's like it's super watery, it's super deep, it's super private, super protected. Um, and so when this happened, he had his moon in Aquarius in the third house. Aquarius is a very kind of like detached sign. It looks at the bigger picture of everything. It tells itself if you want to make an omelet, you need to break a few eggs, which Cancer would be like, I'm not breaking any eggs, and you shouldn't either. So he didn't feel connected to his usual mode of feeling. He felt very disconnected from his feelings just regarding his natal moon sign versus his progressed moon sign. And then he also had his progressed midheaven. So his natal midheaven is at 12 degrees of Virgo. His progressed midheaven was at 1 degree, more or less, of Libra, which was opposite his Mercury. And so, again, it's worked out in relationships. He was thinking about himself. He was thinking about um, how he needed to operate in the world, how he needed to kind of, again, I don't know what the term is when, men or gorillas like beat their chest and they're trying to kind of like prove themselves. Um, that Mercury in Aries is very concerned with his primal instinct, his primal brain, the monkey brain. It kind of shot up through the fourth house to the 10th, and it was like, okay, here I am. And Mercury rules the 10th house. It was kind of like he was kind of like direct, and like I hate what I'm about to say is going to come across as if I'm like defending what happened or defending what he did. I'm not. It's just kind of like what I'm getting from the impression of the chart. He felt like this was his life's mission, and it was kind of like I want to say homecoming. That's not even a word we use in Australia. This was I don't even know what that word means, but this was his homecoming. That's what I'm hearing. And so that midheaven was also squaring his moon, which is going to, kind of bury his feelings even deeper, bury his true feelings even deeper. This was all kind of, he took a step back from how he was actually feeling, how he actually wanted to live his life. He was taking a step back and saying, this is my homecoming, this is my mission, uh, whatever whatever that means. But regarding his other transits, so regressions are very internal regarding how we feel. The evolution, I hate to like phrase it like this because it's so new agey, but it's the evolution of our soul. Essentially, like we all kind of progress throughout life. We're not the same person that we've always been. We can look at an old picture of ourselves and say, yeah, that's me, but I was different then. That's kind of what secondary progressions are like. The chart lives on, it continues to move, and certain things get triggered and pulled out of the psyche and into reality. Regarding his transits, which are more external, and solar arc direct, he had a lot of solar arc directions this year. Solar arcs are kind of like not rare, but they occur less often. Eric had quite a lot happening um, during the span of I did it for January 1998 until August 20th, 1999. So he had a solar eclipse conjunct the fourth, on the 22nd of February. He had a lunar eclipse conjunct the 4th on the 6th of September, both 1998. So, and eclipses are active for 6 months before and after, and they act like a trigger for other events happening in the individual's life at the time, and for other transits, other progressions that are happening. They cause them to kind of manifest. This is regarding timing. You probably don't care about this, so why am I, focusing on it so much? But he had a lot regarding the fourth, 10th house axis, who he is as a person, who he is in his private life versus how he wants to be seen in the world. Again, I hear homecoming, homecoming, homecoming over and over again. It was like this. I don't know. Like, I don't know what homecoming is in America. I don't know if it's the same as like a prom. We have formals in Australia. I don't know if he went to prom. This is like his, like, how I'm assuming like people feel very special on the day that they have their homecoming or their prom. This was that event for him. Um, okay, people are over. He also had a lunar conjunct the North Node. And again, the North Node is in Leo in the ninth house. He was meant to go towards authentic belief systems to him, and he was instead focused on where he stood in society and what he believed regarding society instead of what he believed regarding himself and himself as an individual. Is that making sense? He was focused on all the wrong things. He was focused on too much of what he already knew and wasn't kind of heading towards what he needed to learn. That could do with, the Uranus on the ascendant, kind of like he's very like fixed, thinks he knows everything. Um, anyways, he had um okay, so there was this period, and this kind of freaked me out when I saw it, I'm not gonna lie. There was this period in, I want to say late 1998 to February-ish 1999. But again, the timing can be give or take a few months. He experienced a solar arc of Moon equals Sun and Jupiter equals Venus, and Venus trine or Venus equals midheaven moving into Libra. These are all relationship aspects. So I'll try and write them down. We had the moon equals the sun. The moon is your feminine nature. The sun is your masculine nature regarding, you know, less to do with authority and more just your general kind of being. And when moon equals the sun, it's likely the masculine side of the personality, the feminine side of the personality. There's some kind of interchange between the two. Um, Based on his chart, I don't think he kind of like found this kind of nirvana within himself. I think this has to do with the relationship. Just because he has the sun in the fifth house, which has to do with romance, moon in the eighth house has to do with emotional merging. Um, he also had Jupiter equals Venus, which is typically going to be pretty good regarding relationships. I mentioned that he had his Venus is in Aries in its fall. It's not super comfortable there. It doesn't operate super well. He's not very good socially, I don't think. Um, Jupiter equaling Venus as a solar arc, it's kind of like giving confidence to his Venus and his social urge, uh, elevating his Venus into not prominence, but kind of like he had confidence regarding women. I'm assuming he's straight regarding women, regarding his relating ability. And then he also had Venus trine his midheaven, which is kind of just it is bolstering what I just said, but I don't think I'm gonna like look at it that deeply because it's a soft aspect, not a hard aspect. And then he had his midheaven ingressing into Libra, which is a sign of relationships. And yeah, so that's kind of like three different things that tell me, in my opinion. I don't know if he had a girlfriend. I don't know if he was dating at the time. It wouldn't surprise me if he was. And I think this was kind of a very meaningful and special time in his life because he likely felt for the first time that he had the potential to kind of have success in dating and have success with women. Um, something like that. Again, like he isn't here to kind of like tell us. Um, I'm sure a lot of this has been documented. I don't know about it. But another thing that freaked me out and kind of made me really sad And I feel like it's going to be kind of long for me to explain because I know I need to go soon. He had, I'll just kind of say, I'll try not to, fuck around with the drawing. On the 28th of March, 1998, he had transiting Mercury retrograde conjunct his Venus, which is the ruler of his seventh, and his 11th, who was also conjunct his Sun, because there's that stellium in Aries here. So transiting Mercury went retrograde, conjunct the stellium. I remember Mercury rules his 10th house, what he's doing in the world. And a retrograde is kind of like, especially when it's Mercury, it's about planning, it's about formulating a plan, going over a plan, making sure everything's okay. And that triggered this T square that he has. So there was something that happened around March, late March, early April of 1998. I don't know when they started planning this. It wouldn't surprise me if it was around this time. And then life goes on. He had that, the relate. In my opinion, he had some kind of success in relating. He had some kind of fling, uh, something like that with a girl. I think he felt very happy around this time. Not gonna lie. And then on the 10th of March, 1999, so about a month and a bit before what happened happened. Um, I'm not laughing at what happened. I'm laughing at the fact that I need to phrase it like this. He had another Mercury retrograde conjunct his Mercury. So again, we're getting really granular here. We're not talking about, T square anymore. We're talking about his Mercury, his planning, his place in the world. Mercury went retrograde, conjunct his natal Mercury, setting off this opposition and the T square again. Retrograded, station direct, conjunct his Mercury again. So it would have retrograded somewhere around here. Retrograded all along, and then boom, station direct, setting off his place in the world, how he thought about himself, how he thought about relating, how he wanted to be remembered, and happened about a month before what happened. I think that I don't want to say he had like second guesses. Again, I don't know how long this was planned for. I don't know um, when they got really serious about it. Part of me feels like he wanted to opt out around the start of 1999. He wanted to opt out. He was kind of thinking about other pathways for himself, a different life for himself. And then I think that Mercury retrograde, something happened, and I think it has something to do with his parents because we're talking about the 10th and the 4th again. I think there may have been a conversation with his parents, potentially regarding a girl. Um, you know, that could be something. I'm just hypothesizing. You don't need to worry about girls. You need to worry about school. That girl doesn't like you. She's using you because you have a car. Something like that, kind of like his parents getting in his head regarding girls, regarding his ability to relate. And I think that kind of made him second guess himself regarding relationships and his ability to relate. And then he was kind of like that that final Mercury retrograde kind of like set everything in motion. And he was like, I'm going for this. I'm going for April 20th. And okay, I'll stop sharing my screen because I think that's all I have to say. Um, but yeah, I hope that this kind of made sense. I hope I explained things kind of coherently. I tried not to get sidetracked, but again, I'm not super comfortable talking on camera. I don't know how long I've been talking for, but I need to go now. Bye. Hi everyone. I just wanted this to be kind of like a redux or part two to my Eric Harris video. I don't want to spend too much time editing videos, but I'll try to splice this one together with the last one. I'm just, in my robe. I don't expect, I'm all alone. I don't expect to get interrupted. When I recorded that first video, I was in a rush to get somewhere. Um, the whole point of me trying to get comfortable on camera is the fact that I can't afford to be rushed anymore. But given my current circumstances, I don't really have a choice. So I need to start making time to just sit here and do this and um, just getting over myself a little bit. And so there's no real perfect time for me to do these videos in my life. So I would appreciate you being patient with me in that regard. But and that's why I need to record this second part because I missed plenty of things that I wanted to talk about and wanted to focus on more in that first video. But feeling under pressure and feeling rushed and kind of being pulled in different directions, um, I didn't get around to it, and I wanted to address those issues now. The first one being um, I noticed I was like I watched it back and I noticed I was focusing a lot on um Eric as like a potential partner, and that's not because of any weird reason. It's just because I have my strongest skill set is in synastry and relationship astrology. So I'm always kind of looking at astrology through that lens. Um and I wanted to talk about that opposition more. Oh, actually, I need to get my software up. Just a sec. Yeah, I can't remember what I was saying before, but I wanted to focus more on that T square and that opposition that he had in his chart. And I was kind of all over the place when I was explaining that. So I just wanted to kind of go over that again and this time maybe take a few deep breaths and not feel the need to rush around. And this time I also wrote down notes and I feel, I don't want to say I feel bad about it. It's just that I don't want to, it makes me feel kind of like I don't know what I'm talking about or like I'm a bit of a phony or whatever, which isn't the case because I study so hard. It's just that when I get on camera or really when I'm trying to talk to anyone about anything, kind of just forget or I feel like I can't really access the information. And there's nothing wrong with having some kind of notes to kind of remind me what I'm supposed to say and how I'm supposed to say it and everything like that. So I have some notes here to keep my thoughts in line with what I'm trying to say and to give me like a kickstart of where to go with what I'm trying to say. So I'll share my screen. Okay, let me get my pen. So what I wanted to focus on was this T square. Well, primarily the opposition. Just because I think if I address this first, I'll be able to address the T square. So he has this opposition between Mercury and a conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter in his 10th house. And so when we're talking about an opposition, this is an aspect that is always going to be worked out through relationships. It's an aspect of 180 degrees, and it's an aspect of what Richard Eiderman, who's probably my favorite astrologer, he calls it an aspect of resistance. So typically in astrology, astrologers are going to talk about soft aspects and hard aspects, or good aspects and bad aspects. But Richard Eiderman likes to call them aspects of acceptance, which would be the soft aspects, which means there's an easy interchange between planetary energies, or an aspect of resistance, which is where they're resisting each other. And so with an opposition, it's a challenging aspect, an aspect of resistance, and it gets worked out through relationships because the way this aspect essentially functions is that it's kind of like you interpret it as being you versus someone else, or you versus your environment. It's a polarization of energies to the extreme. And these oppositions, they always want similar, like different but related things. They're kind of just, it's two sides of the same coin, and you need to kind of integrate them and get them to meet in the middle. And the way you get them to meet in the middle is through relating with others. Um, and so with this opposition between his fourth and 10th house, this, as an astrologer, it tells me this is something he got or witnessed, or it got into his psyche through his parents' relationship. And when we're talking about Mercury, which rules his 10th house, and then Jupiter, which rules his fourth house, and then Saturn is in there too, which is usually going to be indicative of the father. And Jupiter as well is a masculine energy. So with Saturn and Jupiter in the 10th house, it's almost like, and the 10th house to me is always representative of the mother. There was a really strong uh, kind of masculine presence to the mother. And I don't think it had to do with her. I think it was more likely going to be Eric's father. I don't want to say dominated the mother, but um, he had a strong kind of like presence with her. That can be good or bad. It's just, again, domination isn't the right word. It's just that um, I think his dad had more of a presence in the relationship between Eric and Eric's mother and Eric's father had more uh what am I trying to say? More influence in their marriage, in my opinion. And so so now that we've addressed the opposition, we can talk about the planets and their relationship to each other. So Mercury is our thought process. It's who and what we think about. It's how we connect A to B and the way we go about doing that. And with Eric having his Mercury in Aries, he's going to be have impulsive thoughts and usually going to select, his method of connecting A to B is going to be with the lowest common denominator because Aries is impatient and it's always in a rush. And like Aries doesn't have time to sit around and consider possibilities. With it being a fire sign, it kind of just wants movement and action and isn't really concerned. And especially being Aries, which is, the most primitive sign, it isn't concerned with, philosophies or um, ethics or anything like that. And so that's his Mercury in Aries. And then when he has Saturn in Libra, I mentioned in the first video, which I think this will be spliced onto that one. Um, they always have a karmic consideration around relationships, and Saturn is restrictions, it's boundaries, it's fear in a lot of ways. And there's no point really talking about the positive keywords for Saturn right now because we're talking about Saturn in a hard or a difficult aspect to a different planet. We're not talking about the soft aspects of any planets of Saturn. We're talking about the hard ones, which is why I'm using like the negative keywords. Um, and with Saturn in Libra, it's going to be a fear of civility, fear of being charming, and kind of like a lack of, or feeling like Eric had a lack of a social urge. And with it in the 10th house, it's okay. So he has that Mercury in the fourth house, and the fourth house is like, it's very foundational to the personality. It's very private and it's very subliminal. Eric would have related more to that Mercury, in my opinion, just because it's in the fourth house, whereas Saturn and Jupiter, both being social planets, and in a very social house, being the 10th house, that I think he would have interpreted that as being an external energy. So, you know how I said it was kind of like oppositions work, like you versus something else, or you versus the environment, you versus the world in this case, for Eric being the 10th house, because the 10th house is about the world outside of the home. He would have interpreted the Jupiter Saturn conjunction as being society, and um, so I think he would have had a kind of restricted. He felt he was restricted from socializing with others for whatever reason, and I think it was because he came off a bit rough around the edges. I think I said that in the first video, with that Mercury in Aries, kind of just um, he wasn't. I don't think he was. I don't think he had great social skills in the regard of like kind of charming people and getting people on your side. He would kind of just impulsively say things, and people typically don't like that kind of thing. We're getting off track. So Saturn in Libra is a kind of okay. If we're talking about the good things about this placement, he had the ability to be very charming, to kind of like cultivate relationships, and that was what he was supposed to work out in this lifetime. But I guess he didn't. And so we're talking about the lower vibration of that, which would be kind of like the restricted social urge, kind of like the lone wolf energy. And with Jupiter, Jupiter is our worldview. We're typically quite overconfident where we find Jupiter and excessive where we find Jupiter. But when we find Saturn and Jupiter together, it's kind of like uh, it's like restricted growth. It's it's growth within boundaries, slow growth. It's it's kind of tempered, and because Saturn is exalted in Libra, I think Saturn has the upper hand in this conjunction. Just because Jupiter in Libra is kind of it's nice, but it's not doing anything spectacular. Whereas Saturn in Libra again is very judicious, and I think that could have affected Eric's relationships just because he would have been. So when you have Saturn in hard aspect to Mercury, these are people that they have like very defined boundaries around everything. And I feel like Eric saw himself as someone that looked at everything very black and white and felt like he came to the best um, conclusions about certain things based on what was kind of on paper. That's how Venus Saturn people kind of work. They don't have uh, leeway in their thinking in the sense where they can't find a gray area, which is just gotta be honest. You need that in relationships. You need to kind of understand not everyone is the same, and maybe some people deserve concession sometimes. Maybe you need to be a little bit forgiving sometimes, and particular certain circumstances with certain people that will help your relationships. And if you're someone that is constantly, reading out of a rule book, which Mercury in aspect of Saturn is going to do, and they typically like a very particular set of rules, and that's the only rule book, and everything else is wrong. Um, I think that was very hard. Uh, that was where like a really big sore spot existed for Eric, and I think it came from the his upbringing and the parental lineage, just because of the fourth and tenth axis. And so there's this book I really like, astrology book I really like. And today, okay, like today, I filmed another video this afternoon, and again, I didn't have much time to film it. I was kind of rushed in that video as well, and my laptop was going flat. It was kind of like a disaster, not a disaster, but I didn't get to say everything that I wanted to say, and I meant to bring the book over here, but it's on the other side of the room, so I can't show you. But it's called Aspects in Astrology by Sue Tompkins, and that is kind of like my holy grail astrology book because it doesn't give you the answers to everything. It's very it teaches you how to think for yourself regarding aspect. It gives you, a certain amount of information, but kind of like it's like, okay, you put it together yourself. And that's what I'm doing in this video. I'm kind of formulating my thoughts about this particular opposition and really ingraining it into my brain so I'm able to talk about it more often and not need to write down notes, like just kind of do it on the fly. Anyways, um, so these are notes directly from that book regarding, okay, sorry, backing up again. I really like that book because Sue Tompkins talks about um, aspects aspects in astrology. It's an aspect book, but it also talks about just aspects within certain modalities and certain signs. So there are chapters dedicated to cardinal oppositions, cardinal squares, being, so there'll be a paragraph written about the opposition between any planet. It's not a cookbook in the sense where there'll be like the sun in Libra opposite Saturn in Aries, and then, moon in Cancer squaring Venus in Libra. It's not like that. It's meant to be taken like any kind of planet within these signs is going to have this kind of flavor to it. And so this is what she has written about an opposition between any two planets in interchange within the signs of Aries and Libra. What I want versus the social norm, fighting versus cooperation, decision versus vacillation. This person is concerned with relationships and one-to-one encounters of all kinds. So that is that's the conclusion I came to when I was taking notes for this video, collecting my thoughts about what I really wanted to say regarding this opposition, just with, the Mercury in Aries being very self-directed and impulsive and being in the fourth house very private versus that's kind of Eric versus society and his ability to relate to other people in society and how he kind of probably feels like very restricted and not understanding why when he says something he's getting the reaction that he is hypothetically. And I'm not saying this to be funny or anything, but like if he saw an astrologer or something in his life, this is something they would have addressed with him and potentially like would have given him the perspective that he needed. And they would have said, he probably wouldn't have listened, but they could have said, you need to be able to kind of like temper your mouth and temper what you say to people and how you're thinking, and maybe start thinking more broadly about relationships and less like granularly. Uh, and so these are also the notes I've compiled regarding. So she writes about Mercury in aspect to Saturn, Mercury in aspect to Jupiter, and then Jupiter in aspect to Saturn as well. And I've compiled all of these kind of like tidbits about those chapters into my notes, and I'll read them out. Arrogant about their opinions, too confident about what they say, too careless about what they say, learning the hard way, that would be the Mercury Saturn, needs everything to be very clearly defined, Mercury Saturn, it wasn't listened to, so why say anything at all? And that I think plugs into the square, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Um, inability to live up to their own inflated sense of right and wrong. And that's regarding the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. Um, just because, again, they're very social planets, they're very socially constructed. And so Jupiter, again, has to do with like belief systems and religion a lot of the time. Saturn has to do with, restrictions and discipline. And so when you see those two in aspect, that there's typically going to be some kind of background with religion or with a set of beliefs that they feel they need to live by, um, a guidebook that they need to live by. They feel restricted by their beliefs. And on the positive side, they can expand their beliefs cautiously. They're not someone that's going to get typically conned into anything or fall into some kind of cult or anything like that because they're too judicious with their thinking. But with the conjunction, because it's a neutral aspect tied into that opposition, I think Eric had a problem with being too rigid in his thinking, and I think I've addressed that already. But okay, so that's what I wanted to say about that opposition. I think that stemmed from his parents and just because, of the axis that it's in and his relationship to society as a whole. And then it's forming this T square to his moon. And what did I write down when I said wasn't listened to, so why would he say anything at all? And so with that moon in Cancer in the eighth house, that's like it's super private and it's almost like, and again, I'm not saying anything bad about his parents because I don't know them and I wasn't there, but it's likely he probably felt very dismissed when he tried to express his emotions to his parents or when he tried to connect his emotions to society in general. He probably felt very dismissed, and hurt, quite honestly, with it being in Cancer. Very hurt by that. And it's almost like, like if he did try and, step out of the rule book he was given, um, and then kind of being met with hostility, or what he perceived as hostility, and probably unwarranted hostility is how he perceived it. It would be like, why would I say anything at all? Like, no one listens to what I have to say, anyways. I'm just going to go back into my shell and shut everyone out and not tell anyone how I'm feeling. And then, April 20th, 1999 happened, and everyone's so kind of, shocked. How could this happen? And I mentioned in my first video as well when I was talking about, um, celebrities being exalted to, no, killers being exalted to the status of celebrities. And I was like, was it Marilyn Manson that kind of like made that connection first, or at least kind of like publicized it and, brought it into the consciousness of the world? And it's ironic because it's ironic I bring him up because I know he said something like super iconic in one of the documentaries about Columbine. They said the interviewer asked him like, "What would you say to them?" Because they were rumored to like his music, and apparently they didn't. And again, there's so much information, misinformation regarding this case and everything. And someone asked Marilyn Manson, he was like a super controversial figure at the time, what would you have said to them? And he said, I wouldn't have said anything. I would have listened to what they had to say. And I think that's what Eric needed and never really got. He never kind of got the emotional nurturance that he needed. And he felt like he was very hard on himself and society was hard on him too regarding just his feelings and how he expressed his feelings. And it all just kind of, exploded. And I think that's all I have to say about, Eric's chart. I just wanted to clarify that because I just felt super rushed in that first video and I didn't want to just kind of like put it out and leave that missing. I also wanted to touch on the progressed lunation cycle because I mentioned the progressed lunation cycle because I love it, but I only spoke about his progressed moon being in Aquarius, which is like disconnected regarding his, I need to stop saying regarding, it was disconnected to his Cancer moon in the eighth house. It was so different. So his emotional nature at the time of this wasn't really in tune with how he felt. Um, Generally, it was he was detached from his emotions, but his progressination cycle, which I don't want to have to explain what it is because I don't feel ready to teach, and that's not really what these videos are about. They're not about me teaching you anything. If you learn something, that's really great, but I don't feel ready to kind of explain things, at least in this video. I'm never ready to explain things right now. But if you know about the progressination cycle, he was in his closing square, which is honestly my favorite cycle in the progressination cycle, just because it's so, I find it to be the most active. um, the full moon is kind of when you're shining bright, and then there's, I think it's the disseminating moon, and then it's the closing moon. I think I forget the titles, but like the closing moon is like you're just about to like burn out and you need to do something. I hate to phrase it like this given what happened, but it's like you're using up the rest of the fuel in your gas tank and you need to do something big and you need to go big or go home. I graduated university during my closing square and um, had a lot going on in my personal life at the time, and I did extraordinarily well in university in that last year. And I don't know how I did it. The only explanation that I have is that I had like transiting Pluto opposite my Mercury, and then um, I was also during my closing square, and I think the closing square gave me the stamina to get through that. And so when you're in that closing square period of your life, you kind of you're super active and you're trying to get a bunch of things done. And again, I think it's very reflective of the choices that he made and reflective of what happened and how, explosive everything was. Yeah, that's just some clarity I wanted to add to the Eric Harris video. Um, and I'm so like new to, YouTube and social media and stuff. I mean, like I've been on it, given my age and stuff, but not posting things. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to title the video. Again, I feel like the way I describe everything is going to come off as like, I'm glamorizing the situation. I'm really not. It was just um something that had been haunting me since I saw his chart because it was the astrology was just so loud, and with that, the transiting Mercury retrogrades over his Mercury, and there was just something about that that really spoke to me, and I just wanted to address it in a video because I haven't looked it up. I don't know if anyone else has done videos on this, but yeah, and like I've kind of had this idea where because I'm trying to become comfortable talking I keep saying that because I'm trying to get my words out. Um, I feel like the best approach for me is just going to be um analyzing the charts of people that have done horrible things because I can phrase things wrong. I don't care if I'm offensive to them, just because they don't deserve any kind of, yeah, glamorization or any kind of, uh, I feel like I don't need to be as careful as what I say because I don't care if I hurt them. Like if I was to do Ariana Grande's chart, I don't want to say anything that might potentially be hurtful to her just because she didn't ask me to look at her chart or anything like that. Um, so I just want to be able to kind of gauge what is okay to say and what is not okay to say and things like that. So if I'm doing analysis of kind of like the unsavory people of the world's charts, I feel like I can just kind of just go with it and learn from that and not let anyone kind of get hurt or offended in the process. Um, so yeah, I'm going to do I think Chris Watts next and Casey Anthony as well because they have some interesting stuff in their charts. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope that I think this was a bit more coherent than my last one. And I think I might film videos in this spot from now on and probably around this time of night when I don't have any other responsibilities left. So thank you for watching. And if you want to contact me, I'll put my website in the description. Um, and yeah, I'll put my email and my website in the description and you can get in touch with me there. But yeah, thank you for watching. Bye.